forget, I should have done glasses. My name's not. Okay, so with that, my name is Monica Gullotta. I am an educator, I'm a lecturer, I am an author. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I've been in private practice for over 20 years. In addition to providing support groups for individuals grappling with anxiety and depression for over 16 years. And I also provide workshops on topics pertinent to mental health within the community. Today, I will be addressing shame. First and foremost, the causes of shame, the effects of shame, and how to heal shame. So Carl Jung, the psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, stated that shame is a soul-eating emotion. And boy, was he right, because there are millions and millions of people that are grappling with shame that don't even realize it, and I happen to be one of those people. So how, in fact, and what, in fact, causes shame? So there are a number of causes of shame. First and foremost, harsh words from parents and caregivers and family members. It is also a result of childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment, bullying, mental illness, poverty, secrets, the dominant culture, and sexuality. You typically see thousands and thousands of individuals in the LGBTQ community that are grappling with shame. So now, what are the effects of shame? So I want to point this out because this is very important. Because shame is such a powerful emotion and such a painful emotion to deal with, most individuals want to dissociate from the emotion or cut themselves off from it. And as a result, that's where the effects take hold. So what are the effects of shame? So first and foremost, there's addiction. And addiction is about, well, of course, I don't want to feel that shame. So in essence, I'm going to numb it out so I don't have to experience it. You also have anxiety and depression, which are byproducts of shame. In addition to that, you also have codependency, you have perfectionism, you have imposter syndrome, you have withdrawal, you have isolation, you have self-sabotaging behaviors, and you also have suicidal ideation. So shame has a plethora of effects. Now I would like to move into healing strategies for dealing with shame. So my book, Conquering Shame, Surviving to Thriving, acts as a roadmap and a resource for navigating through shame. The book is wonderful because it demonstrates my experiences with shame. In essence, how shame becomes implanted, internalized, an inherent part of one's identity. Now, the book is also wonderful in that it teaches individuals how, in essence, to become their own therapist. But I want to emphasize the importance when you are navigating through shame to work with a therapist or a mental health professional to mitigate any potential risks with shame. As we continue to move further into the book, it's wonderful because it provides a questionnaire. And the questionnaire is instrumental in helping individuals to identify which level of shame that they might be grappling with. So there are 4 levels of shame. Does anybody know what they might be? The 4 levels? So there's low, there's moderate, there's severe, and there is toxic. Okay? So as we move further into the book, I provide the developmental and recovery stages of shame, which I personally developed as a mechanism to navigate through the stages and to receive a better understanding of how shame takes hold. So the first stage is referred to as victimization. The victimization stage, the individual is oblivious to the fact that they are experiencing maltreatment from a parent, a caregiver, or a family member. Stage 2 is saturation. And for this particular stage, what's happening is the individual is experiencing ongoing maltreatment. They're enduring it. It's more chronic. There's a chronicity to it. And at this particular stage, what then happens is the individual starts believing these falsehoods about themselves. So for instance, I'm unlovable. I'm defective. I am worthless. I don't fit in. And at this particular stage, what's happening is the foundation for shame is taking hold. Okay? Now, the third stage is indoctrination. At this particular stage, what's happened as a result of ongoing shame-based victimization and shame-based saturation, the individual is now been indoctrinated. And what this basically means is they believe, yes, I'm defective, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy. There is something fundamentally wrong with me. And at this stage, what happens is they disown the authentic self, and the imposter self emerges as a mechanism in which to receive love. The next stage is immobilization. At this particular stage, the authentic self is completely immobilized. It is completely blocked and it is completely repressed. At this particular stage, the individual is now coping through maladaptive coping mechanisms. This would be addiction, this would be anxiety, this would be depression. And all of these messages that they have received are now internalized and habituated. I also want to say at this particular stage, this is where individuals will experience burnout, breakdowns, and suicidal ideation. The next step is restoration. The restoration stage represents the individual is becoming aware of the presence of shame. The individual is returning to that authentic self. So in essence, they're mindful as to the presence of shame. Stage 6 is transformation. In this particular stage, a dramatic change has taken place, and that is because the individual is now cognizant of the shame. And not only are they cognizant of the shame, but they are able to utilize techniques and tools to keep the shame at bay. The last stage is the best stage of all, and I love this stage. The last stage is called liberation. In the liberation stage, the individual is no longer encumbered by a push-pull mentality of shame. They are able to recognize shame and prevent shame from spiraling out of control, okay? They are also aware of how to co-regulate with their inner child. And at this particular stage, they're able to become that authentic self and that person that they were always intended to be. As we move further into the book, Conquering Shame, Surviving to Thriving, it offers 4 very key components for healing shame. And I cannot stress the importance of these components, and the need to have them implemented on a daily basis as a mechanism to keep shame at bay. And those 4 key components are acceptance, compassion, forgiveness, and self-love. Again, I just want to reiterate the importance of these core elements. If they are not applied on a daily basis or throughout their lives, it's going to thwart the overall reconstructive process in conquering shame. So with that, I would like to move on and discuss more tools and techniques to help continue facilitating and healing shame. So the next one would be a more creative tool or technique, writing a letter to the perpetrator or perpetrators. Now, when I work with clients, in some instances, they'll say like, yeah, I want to write this letter. But oftentimes the letter might simply be for them as a mechanism to process it, not necessarily send it. But for those that say, yeah, you know, Monica, I want to send the letter, they have my blessings. But again, it's instrumental in helping them to discover more about the shame and how, in essence, it manifests itself in their life and how it cultivates itself. The next one I love is probing questions. When you work with a therapist, maybe at the first session, the first question they might ask is, how can I help you? So when one is dealing with their own shame, they might ask themselves certain questions. Number 1, what is the origin of my shame? Number 2, what in essence triggers my shame? What activates the shame? Okay? The next technique I love, because this was very instrumental in helping me on my journey with shame. And that is reframing shame. So you're probably wondering, reframing shame, how do you reframe shame? Well, here it is. To realize that when you were born, you were not born with shame. Shame, in essence, is often projected upon you from other individuals, in essence, who have not done their own work with their shame, don't have the ego strength, they don't want to deal with it or endure it, so they're going to, guess what, push it off onto somebody else. I think that that's very important to be aware of. The next thing in reframing shame is, and this is very, very important, I personally do not believe shame is a mental illness. I believe shame is environmentally induced. And I also believe that shame has the capacity to be healed, to be restored, and to be conquered. And I'm proof of that. Once upon a time, my shame kept me down to the point where I wasn't able to, let's say, be the person that I am today, but I was able to conquer it, transcend it. Here I am. So, and that feels good. Okay. Moving right along, other tools and techniques to help facilitate shame. We look at somatic practices. Somatic practices such as dance, yoga, meditation, dance movement, breathing techniques. They're very, very instrumental. They're very, very helpful. Also, homeopathic or holistic approaches such as Reiki, Tai Chi. And then, of course, you can go the creative route. Simply journaling, simply writing about your experiences. I can't begin to tell you years ago when I had shame. You know, it's funny because you hear people talking about panic attacks. Well, I have shame attacks. And so when I would have my shame attacks back then, I found it very instrumental writing about it. And writing about it not only gave me perspective, but helped me to understand why I needed to write about it and move towards it rather than moving away from the emotion, getting to know that shame better in a more friendly kind of way. Moving along, I also have to say over the past 20 years that I've been working with clients and in group meetings, I have been able to develop my own techniques for conquering shame that I'm very proud of, that have been very instrumental in helping other individuals. And one of my favorite techniques, it is called ARM. And ARM is an acronym that stands for acknowledge, recognize, and manage. So let's take, for instance, an individual that's having some issues with shame that perhaps I'm working with. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to accept it. Okay, you're having shame right now. Admit it. Acknowledge it. It's okay. We're all human. We experience shame in our lives. The next part or piece of the equation is recognizing it. I'm recognizing where that shame, in essence, is manifesting itself within my body. For a lot of individuals, I feel it in my heart. Oh God, it's so painful. I feel it in my stomach. Oh my God, it's making me sick to my stomach. Or my hands are sweating. Okay? My heart's beating fast. Okay? And then we move into managing the shame. And for other people, other techniques are going to be more instrumental in helping them combat and mitigate those symptoms. So again, that might be for some people doing some breathing techniques initially, or maybe doing some journaling. And then I often tell clients and group members this: whatever works for you, do more of what works and less of what doesn't. What you don't want to do when you're experiencing a shame attack is to keep ruminating over it. So let's say, for instance, I'm up here and I make a mistake and I utilize the wrong word. I get home and I keep ruminating. Oh my God, you made a mistake. You're a failure. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That, in essence, is allowing what? The shame to take hold and spiral. Shame has an anchoring effect. Ultimately, shame wants to protect itself, okay? But at the same time, it's taking you down. And that's what you don't want to have happen, okay? So it's very important to be cognizant of that. Other techniques that I developed, oh, I love this next one. I call it the shame-o-meter. And you're probably wondering, the shame-o-meter? So again, working with clients, I'll be like, okay, you're having shame? Oh yeah, I've got shame today, Monica. And I said, no problem. We're going to move into what? ARM, accept it, recognize, manage. But what I want for you to do is on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being very high, I want for you to gauge it. And they'll say to me, well, gosh, Monica, right now it's an 8 or a 9. And I say, that's okay. Okay? So And then in some instance, it might be a 3, it might be a 4, it might be a 5. But it's important gauging it so we can determine how much work we have to do in essence to try to what? Get that individual back to baseline and grounded and not so caught up in what? The ruminations and the anchoring of shame. So that's where the shame-o-meter comes in handy, okay? This next technique that I came up with was quite interesting and creative. So let me just share this story with you. It's actually quite funny. So I was at my wit's end with shame. And I guess that's a good thing because it became the catalyst for me really wanting to push through it. So shame had a very strong, heavy presence in my life. So I was like, I want to understand this magnitude of shame that I'm carrying around with me. So I kid you not, I went to my garden and I found a rock. And it had to be a certain rock. It couldn't be this big boulder, but it had to be big enough so I could carry it with me. So what I did was I took this rock, I painted it, and on the top of it, I put shame. Now, guess what I did with this rock? I took this rock with me everywhere I went. I kid you not. I put it in my purse. I took it to the bank. I took it to the grocery store. I took it on errands. And you know why I did it? I did it because I wanted to show myself and help myself understand the magnitude of shame. So literally how heavy it was carrying that shame rock, and metaphorically speaking, how heavy it was for me to carry. And you know what? After you carry it for about a week or two, guess what? You don't want to carry it any longer. And so in essence, this became for me a motivational tool, technique, and a catalyst for trying to, guess what? Once again, overcome and conquer shame. So with that, now I would like to kind of open up and move into more of a discussion about shame with you. So I have a couple of questions to present to you today. Number one, did you think shame could be so powerful? Number two, did you realize that shame could have such a plethora of effects? I love this next question. Number three, do you believe that you have the power and the control and the agency to overcome shame? Also, in terms of the developmental and recovery stages of shame, do they resonate with any of you? And as you sit here today with me, you know, you reflect on, oh my goodness, maybe I do have a little bit of shame in my own life. Or maybe I'm working with, you know, clients, or I have family members that are not even cognizant of shame. And they're just carrying this very, very adverse emotion around with them that could be so very detrimental and damaging. So with that, if anybody would like to kind of open up and share any thoughts or ideas that they might want to share with me and the rest of the participants here today. Anybody?
How did you know, I can't answer the questions you asked, but I have a question about, like, how did you know what was affecting you was shame and it wasn't like this distraction or addiction or, you know, other things that ADHD, you know?
Right, that's a great question. So what happened for me was, well, I never grappled with issues, you know, of addiction with alcoholism. So my issue was being an overachiever. So I was about the perfectionism. So what happened to me was, regardless of whatever I would attain, it was never enough. But in that, there was always this underlying feeling of, like, you know, I have to hide that if I make a mistake. So it was very interesting because I was always striving and always overachieving. You know, I was doing not one support group, but three, and not writing one book, but four, and getting awards. And it was never enough. But it was so interesting that because for me, with all that perfectionism and overachieving, what was at the base of it all and actually driving the perfectionism was my shame. So what would happen is every time I would do something, there would be this very, how do I want to call it? I would inflict shame-based victimization on myself. So, Monica, you're so stupid. Monica, look at these mistakes that you're making. So then what happens is the shame starts rearing its head more and more. But when I am working with my therapist, this is very interesting. We're talking, one session, all of a sudden, he says to me out of the clear blue, I'm telling him all these things about what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. And he says to me, have you, have you ever considered shame? Now I knew shame, and I knew how to feel it, and I knew that I was experiencing it my whole life, but I never understood its magnitude. So he was able to, in essence, put a spotlight on it for me, but it had an ongoing presence in my life. So I hope I answered your question. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Sounds like you've approached this whole situation basically as a psychotherapist, and in dealing with a patient, you presumably allow that patient to describe what their background is, what their circumstances are, how they're feeling, and then you try to lead them through the techniques that you outline to a process of self-awareness and then try to get them to slowly, in effect, cure of this overwhelming shame that you have.
Mhm.
Where is that linked to? You haven't mentioned drugs, and so you know, and the origins of shame can come from different directions. One of which is mental illness, and so that that type of origin may be more prone to pharmacological use of medications than what you're talking about.
So let me clarify. So first and foremost, when I work with clients, I develop my own paradigm, and I refer to it as psychoeducational. So in essence, I draw from 5 components: psychoeducational, empowerment, self-care, spirituality, if they want to incorporate that into the equation. Now, when it comes to shame, you know, people might think, well, for me personally, I believe it's environmentally induced. However, shame can, individuals grappling with addiction often rely on things, as I previously said, as a mechanism to dissociate from the shame. So it's so painful, I don't want to feel it, so I'm going to drink, I'm going to eat, I'm going to, you know, smoke marijuana. Again, as a mechanism not to deal with it. So it depends on the individual and their point of view of shame. Um, Individuals working in addiction, they might view shame as a form of mental illness. Again, it varies from person to person. Um, Individuals that I've worked with for over 16 years in group and one-on-one sessions, some of them have enormous shame, believe it or not, as a result of the mental health system. This idea or notion that you're receiving care or treatment, that can be very stigmatizing in itself. Individuals that are on medications, they might feel very, you know, shame-ridden as a result of that. Um, I am happy to say that I do believe that mental health, thank God, is becoming more normalized in our society. And quite frankly, if individuals aren't experiencing anxiety and depression today, oh my goodness, who doesn't have anxiety and depression today? So going back to what you're saying, your question was shame as it relates to mental health and addiction.
Not so much addiction, but the, well, and maybe you have clients that see both you and a psychiatrist or a
Absolutely.
physician
Absolutely.
who's actually prescribing often powerful psychmeds.
Exactly.
And that's where I'm not exactly clear.
So what
Because
exactly?
as you know, there are pros and cons to psychmeds, all psychmeds.
Yes.
Side effects.
Yes, exactly. So what exactly are you asking me? I'm trying to.
Oh, I just meant you hadn't mentioned in your presentation
Uh-huh.
any reference to people who suffer the shame who are actually being prescribed
Right.
by you, not by you,
Right.
by someone else.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Powerful antidepressants, antipsychotics,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Right, right. The book itself doesn't go into that per se, but again, this is more about providing a book that really helps to explain shame, in essence, how it takes shape and hold. But it doesn't move into that whole addiction piece and that component of it. No, the book does not go into
When
it.
did you write the book? How long ago did you write the book?
Actually, I just wrote this book last year, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
So
So for
based on your experience,
absolutely, absolutely, it
did
basically.
Did you integrate concepts of other researchers, other people to come up with your framework?
No, it's all my own.
Okay.
And I'm very, very proud of that. But I have had exposure with college and, all the different therapeutic approaches. I'm happy to say I consider myself a more creative type, and I just love it. I love to come up with tools, techniques, theories, and
Have you been asked to speak out of this area?
it's funny that you should mention this because I'm doing a vision board and I'm looking for more visibility and collaboration. I have most recently been asked to do a podcast from a gal. She's in all different countries. I've been on Bridge Street, but I'm absolutely looking for more exposure because I feel this topic is so very important because of the fact that shame is such an insidious emotion. Most people are not even cognizant of the fact that they have it. And the sad reality is I have some clients that I'm working with literally in their 70s and 80s that are contending with shame. And we're not even aware of it. So I felt it very necessary. And I have to say this, the therapist that I was working with, he kept prodding me, you've got to write this book. It was funny because I was actually writing a book on trauma. He said, no, Monica, you need to do shame. I said, shame? I said, I can't write a book on shame. He goes, oh, yes, you can. And here I am. And I'm so glad that I did. So, does anybody have any more questions for me? I would be happy to answer them for you today. Yes?
About shame-based affirmations.
Yes.
What are some examples of, let's say, feeling shame? What's an affirmation that you can
To counter shame?
Exactly.
I am not shame. I am above shame. My shame does not define me. So in essence, being able to see the emotion, but detach oneself from it. And affirmations are a very kind of creative thing. You can just, whatever kind of comes up, you can make, and create your own in essence. You know what I'm saying? And I'm all about the creative aspect of recovery, with myself and my clients and my group members and my journey in general. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Yes.
How does codependent tie into shame?
Great question. No, that's a very fair question. So take myself, for example. What happens if you don't receive certain things as a child? You move into the imposter self. and you want to become that people pleaser.
Well, that's real.
Yeah, so codependency is, oh, you know, if I do this, this, and this, and this, and this, you'll love me. And, you know, if I heal this, this, and this, and this, and this, guess what? I'll be better and I'll be good. But then all of a sudden you're moving into what? Enabling and codependent what? Tendencies. And then all of a sudden you can get what? Sucked up into that vortex.
Yeah.
And that's going to create what? Issues. That codependency could in fact be a byproduct of shame. So again, shame is so insidious. It could be at the base of perfection. It can be at the base of codependency. It's there and it's brewing beneath the surface. And like I said, it's such an insidious emotion because it doesn't want to be addressed, but at the same time, it needs to be addressed to be healed. So it's like this oxymoron. It's like, what do you do with this thing? You know, it's funny, even when I do posts on Facebook, do you know what happens when I talk about shame? Not a whole lot. People are like, that's right, crickets, huh? And it's almost like I got the bubonic plague. Oh my God, Monica's talking about shame. It's so necessary that we have this conversation. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments for me today?
another
Yes,
thought.
go ahead.
To me, finding my authentic self is part of I read your book, by the way, because somebody gave it to me to read, so I read it all the way through.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
I had 21 hospitalizations, so I don't have that anymore right now.
Praise
I'm
God.
free from it. But like you're saying, shame is, to me, is not a, I don't know what to say, it's not, after a while, I didn't need medication for it.
It's not, to me, it's not a mental illness. Yeah.
Learning how to say no helps, all these little things.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to say
Good.
yes when I should, no when I shouldn't.
Yes.
But also with the personality, I realized to me, my authentic self, part of it is to me is that I'm more of an introverted person, which is okay.
Yes.
I thought it was a bad thing.
No,
That
it's
I had
not.
to act like someone else. Now I can get a little bit more comfortable. I'm not there, but get more comfortable with it. It's okay if I don't have to speak up with people.
That's
I don't
right.
have to compete with them.
That's
if I want, I can. If I don't want to, it's fine.
That's right.
So that's helped me a little bit. Little phases of little things have helped me.
Yeah.
And I addressed myself as a fearaholic. I knew you had shame, but I figured it probably crosses somewhere, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fear is what held me in bondage, but shame was part of the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think shame and fear at times go hand in hand. They, in essence, feed off each other. And it's like about, you know, what came first, the fear or the shame or the fear. It doesn't matter. What matters is they kind of, like I said, kind of coexist together, you know? Yeah. So, any other questions? Yes.
I work with little kids in pre-K.
Yep.
Before kindergarten. And how do I know, how do I see when they're at the effect of shame?
That's a good question. So typically, shame can take place in the first 6 months of life. If there's not what is referred to as secure attachment with a mother and a child, the mother doesn't stay focused to the child and looks away, that's when shame can take effect and hold. So when you're working with children that are more, how do I want to say this, closed off, they're not looking at you, body language is closed, they're very quiet, they're very reticent, they put their head down, they're posturing. Those could be potential signs, absolutely. And it's hard to recognize it in a child because a child doesn't recognize it within themselves. And that's why it's so important for children exhibiting maladaptive behaviors, issues with anxiety or fear. Hey, what's going on in the home environment? Let's draw this child out more, get a greater understanding about their history and their background. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
Just one more quick one. I don't know if you had this situation, but one of the things we discover over a long period of time is that certain relationships are problematic, including, especially after parents die, sibling relationships can deteriorate and for different reasons. But anyway, have you ever had a situation where one of the strategies you mentioned was to write a letter to completely, and nothing we can do about it. No overture of, no reaching out is received successfully, and even if you are 100% correct about the underlying issues that may cause this schism,
Yeah.
Do you ever have any situations?
Absolutely.
Like that?
Absolutely. And that's
So basically, the person is in a coping.
right. So in a situation where, you reach out and you want to facilitate reconciliation, I always tell my clients three very important words to always remember. Consider the source. You have to realize when you are interacting with individuals, there are some people that I refer to as unhealthy, unhealed, and unwell. So you can make all of these, reaching out, wanting to reconcile, but they're not having it. So that's where you have to realize, get back to that place of four core components, acceptance. And accepting the fact that, well, I tried to no avail, for whatever reason, they're not responding. You know what? I understand. I'm going to accept.
Very hard.
Yes.
Very, very hard.
Very
If
hard.
you're dealing with a narcissist.
Absolutely.
Someone actually afflicted with narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes.
Which resources say is incurable. Then it doesn't matter what you do.
Absolutely.
And in fact, as far as self-preservation, you should actually detach her. You should not constantly try to.
Well, absolutely. And I've had my share of narcissists in my life, and narcissists are never going to be accountable, responsible, or manage their behaviors because they lack the ego strength. And when I talked about projection in the book, I was referring to narcissists. So in essence, again, going back to acceptance, realizing, considering the source, I'm dealing with a narcissist. They don't have enough ego strength to deal with this. They're never going to look at this. I understand. I forgive them. But let me put the spotlight back on myself. And what, in essence, can I do for myself to what? Make the situation what? Better. Power and control is not something external, it's internal. We have to cultivate that. Even if we are dealing with a narcissist, a person grappling with addiction, schizophrenia, whatever the case may be, agency is within us. It's not something external. That's my point of view. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one more.
Okay.
Shame, so you're looking at shame as not as an addiction or a psychiatric disorder. I don't see it as myself personally for all my.
Shame is an emotion.
It's emotion.
Shame is an emotion. Okay, I had shame my whole life. But guess what? I'm doing all that I'm doing. I don't perceive myself or see myself as mentally ill. I believe the shame was projected upon me for parents that were not able to deal with their own shame. I've chosen to forgive them, obviously, but I am not in any way, shape, or form. My functionality is not affected. And as I look at shame, I realize it can be healed, it can be conquered. For me, it wasn't conquered through medication, hard work, practice, and discipline, moving toward the emotion. Again, people move into resistance and denial. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to look at it. Well, that's not solving and resolving the problem. That's actually cultivating more shame.
Yeah.
It's knowing these things that's paramount and crucial.
How about having a person to talk to once in a while? I live by myself, so I don't want to slip back into it. If I get a little lonely, that might creep upon me. So I'm trying to, with my church, develop some relationship with people because I think loneliness kind of brings me back into that. I have to be careful that I get out every day and do. For me, that's what I have to do for now is get out and developing, find some very trusted people, not just anybody. But
Absolutely,
so I can
absolutely.
have that saying like, this is what I'm struggling with now.
Exactly. It's very important when you are navigating through shame to find an individual that you can really work with and trust, somebody that's not going to judge you, somebody that's not going to criticize you, and in essence, what? Cultivating more shame within you.
Yeah.
I was working with a client the other day. She's amazing. She's 24 years old. She's going to law school. She's an overachiever. She's a perfectionist. She has toxic shame. So we're talking, and she says to me, just on Monday, she says, she says, my perfectionism is so bad. And I'm thinking, I said, tell me a little bit more about the perfectionism. She says, well, I've got this test, she says, and I'm so afraid that I'm going to fail this test. And I looked at her and I said, and what's going to happen if you do fail the test? She says, oh my God, I'd be so embarrassed. I said, there's your shame. She put a big smile on her face and she says this to me, Monica, I am so glad that I have you and I can talk to you about my shame, because some people just don't seem to get it. So again, it's about putting it out there and saying, hey, it's okay, I got it. I'm sure we all have it here to some degree, but it's okay and you're okay. It's only an emotion, it's only shame. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you believe, like my therapist daughter, that everyone should be in therapy?
Do I believe everybody should be in therapy? Well, that's a loaded question. I will say this, I believe that therapy is instrumental for acting as a vehicle and helping you navigate through life better. I think in some instances, for some individuals, it might be stigmatizing because of the labels that it places upon people. I don't necessarily agree with that particular approach, but I believe in this day and age with everything that's going on, it might be helpful to speak to or with a therapist, a pastor, a priest, a counselor, a mentor, whatever you can find, because this world that we're living in a little bit, I would have to say it's a little bit mentally unstable myself. So I see nothing wrong with getting help, and I'm definitely pro, therapy and coaching, whatever the case might be, whatever works best for the individual, but I absolutely think it's a sign of strength to get your needs met in an emotional and mental health way.
A little better. That used to be a deterrent for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Cost of
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think mental health care in itself, there's room for improvement in terms of changing the mental health paradigm. Absolutely. I think with most systems, there's always room for improvement. Yeah. So with that, any other questions? Well, I hope I answered all your questions, and I want to say this. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Manlius Library. I would like to thank you, Martin, for making this possible, and I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming here today and spending time with me. It means the world to me. With that, I have some business cards up here. Feel free to take one. You can also go onto my website. There is a link right to Amazon for anybody who is interested in purchasing my book. And also, you can become aware of upcoming activities that I provide throughout the year. I'm kind of winding down right now, but I'll be winding up the first of the year. And I'm always looking to collaborate with other mental health professionals and garnish more visibility. And so with that, I want to thank you so much for your wonderful questions and listening to me this afternoon. Thank you so much.
I'm going to let you all know we have bought a copy of Samantha's book for the collection, so we